I started an Etsy shop, but I saved up about $20,000, and that's what we used for our first down payment.
That's Casey from Brick by Brick Wealth, a mom who helps support her family with income from only 8 rental properties.
It's like a whole invisible person lives in our house and gives us their paycheck.
In this episode, you'll learn her struggle holding a traditional job.
And I would drive an hour and a half to work, and I would leave in the dark, and I would come home in the dark. Is this what life is supposed to be?
Her fears while starting real estate.
Something inside was holding us back from going all the way and closing on these deals. I was scared, and I didn't know if what I was doing was right.
And how she keeps her rentals low maintenance.
Then when someone's in there, you might get a phone call like about something's broke. I mean, there are months go by, I hear from nobody.
And now we're going to dig into all of that and more. You have 8 properties. You have worked for 6 years to build up to that point. Obviously, a lot of work. You're in a good place where you have cash flow and you have wealth. But I want to pick that story apart. I know people are listening to this at various stages of their journey. If you could, I want to go all the way back to before you even started investing in real estate. Maybe do you have a story, a moment, a situation that kind of motivated you to even get into this in the first place? For those who are kind of on the fence about even getting into it, where were you when you just started this journey?
Well, my dad actually kind of got me started thinking about the whole entrepreneurial mindset and just doing things differently, going against the grain. So I had my dad on one shoulder always saying, Casey, go your own direction. Don't go get a 9-to-5 job. Make more money for yourself. Blah, blah. My mom, a nurse, right? Carrying the family through all my dad's entrepreneurial journeys was like, you need a job. You need to go be a nurse, go do something. Like, don't be like your father. You know, I had the devil and the angel on each shoulder. And I was like, when I got my first real job right out of college, I lived in Southern California at the time, and I would drive an hour and a half to work, and I would leave in the dark, and I would come home in the dark, and I was crying because I'm like, is this what life is supposed to be? Am I really supposed to like leave at 7 a.m. and get home at 7 p.m. every day? And
soul crushing, right?
It was soul crushing. Like, we go to school our whole lives for this opportunity to never live life. And thankfully, the company shut down. There were some financial issues, like with the owner. The company was great, but it's personal for him. So I only worked there for 3 months. So I had my only real job for 3 months ever in my life. And it was a blessing. And I said, okay, this was a sign. What am I going to do with my life now? And I said, well, I'm going to do real estate. I'm going to do what my dad said. I tried what my mom said, and this sucks. I'm going to do my own thing. And the first thing that I thought of was, okay, well, I love houses. I love looking at houses. So I'm going to go be a real estate agent. That was my idea initially of being an entrepreneur, or at least creating my own schedule. I knew I wanted to have a family one day, and being able to create my own schedule was with real estate, was going to be the thing. So I became a real estate agent, and I started helping investors find flips and stuff in Southern California. And it was okay. I didn't really like it. But what I did see was how rich people were that owned real estate, because I was working with investors that were young. They were a little older than me at the time, but they were putting all cash on like $1 million homes. And I'm like, whoa. Now, I didn't understand then. It probably wasn't all their money and all the creative financing things back then, but it was definitely an eye opener. And that's what led me to say, okay, investing is what's going to get me to where I want to be. It's going to allow me to spend time with my family and, kind of have my cake and eat it too. As I say, I'm going to be able to make money plus have my time back so I can spend it with my family.
So you were in Southern California at that point. Did you invest in Southern California to start, or did you have something else that changed to get you started?
We tried. It was about 2010, before my first kid was born. And my husband, Blake, and we made over 40 offers on properties in the Inland Empire, and we never quite went all the way. We were in contract on some, we did home inspections and backed out, or we would counter, but not counter quite enough. Something inside was holding us back from going all the way and closing on these deals. And looking back now, I know what it was. I was scared, and I didn't know if what I was doing was right. I knew literally nobody who owned any rental properties whatsoever. So I'm just relying on myself, my knowledge. I understood how to rehab houses from helping my dad. I thought I figured out what rents would be, but it's just me figuring it out. So I think we weren't really willing to take that risk because it was such a financial commitment at the time when we were younger, and buying a $200,000 property, they were like 145 to 175 at the time. That that was a big risk for us. What if it didn't work out? What if? We all know the what ifs. Everyone starting out, there's so many what ifs that go through our mind that we just don't do anything. So we didn't. And it wasn't until we moved to Memphis and I said, okay, we have to do this now. There's no more chickening out. We have to actually start buying real estate. So it wasn't until 6 years later or so that we actually dove in.
Thank you for telling, how you were feeling at that point. I feel like we've all been there. Like when you first start something new, it's so tricky to figure out your own psychology, right? Because we have blocks in our head. We all have stories that are going on. And what's so interesting though is, you can't go back and rewind the clock, but 2010, Southern California, properties under $200,000. If you play the what if game, look at what the message to me is like, hey, if you can figure out your own psychology and get off the sideline, you could have had some deals there probably that made you a bunch of money, right? Sometimes we're in our own way from the opportunities we see.
I looked back, we found the box. So at the time I was a real estate agent, right? And back then you had to keep your offers, you had to keep paperwork for 7 years, right? Because that was the law. So when I moved to Tennessee, I brought this whole bin of contracts with me because there was fax machines, but their DocuSign was kind of starting, but everything was like sign it in person, fax it over. So I had all these papers and it was a few years ago, I'd forgotten all about this. I was going through my attic and I found this tub of papers and I was like, what is this? I'm like, oh, offers. I forgot we did this. Like I forgot we had this period of our lives where we made those offers. So I checked out some of the addresses and it gives me the chills and I'm so mad about it. But those houses that were 145 to 100, they're over they're 6 to 700,000 now. And their rents are no longer like $1,500. They're like 3,200. So I'm just kicking myself because, and everyone says they wish they hadn't started sooner. They wish. If I would have just done it, if I would have taken the risk on myself, if I would have known anyone that could help me at the time to do that, to make those right choices, we would be in such an even better financial position if I owned a few of those houses.
Well, I want to go back to your story, but just since we're on this topic, I've seen on your social media channel, it seems like you kind of try to push people like get in the game. I'm wondering if this maybe is part of that motivation, but what would you say about that? If people are listening here in 2024, even 2025, do you still feel the same way, even with the market we're in, even with the way things are going right now?
110%. If you're to look at the history of property values over time, just even think in 1900, what were property values? 1950, 1970, 1990. Today. Have we ever seen such a big decline? The values never came back. No. Have we ever seen rents go down and stay down for a long period of time? No. So what does that say? That says, even if you do mess up a tiny bit, maybe you overpay for a house. Guess what? You're going to forget about that in 3 years. It's not going to matter. The values are always going to go up. Yes, get your numbers right and all those things, but it's more important to get started and buy a property today because in 10 years, the value is likely going to double. In 10 years, you're going to have a much higher rent and you're just that much closer to having your loan paid off. For what I tell people getting started, you can get stuck in analysis paralysis for years. I talk to new investors, people that haven't bought anything yet all the time, because that's what I love to do, help people with their first property. I love helping people. The first question I ask is, how long have you been thinking about investing? And they'll say, sometimes it's, just this year, but a lot of times it's years. Well, it's been years we've been thinking about for years. I'm like, imagine if you would have just started and bought something a few years ago. Like, well, your life will change and the value of real estate is always going to go up. So it's going to cover up any little mistakes they make.
Agree, 100%. In one of my nerdier moments, Casey, you'll probably appreciate this. I went back because people always talk about like worst case scenarios. I can't go in, what if the market goes down right now? And I was thinking about the Great Depression because that's pretty much as bad as it's gotten in the last 120 years. And I was like, what did rents actually do during the Depression? If I had bought a property, bought it in 1929 or 30, right before the Great Depression, what did the prices do? What did the rents do? It was really interesting. Like the prices, as you can imagine, like went way down, like 60, 70%, I think was what happened. But the really interesting thing was if you were a landlord, rents went down about 30% in most cases. Depends on what location, like the better location you're in, the less they went down. Worse location, maybe they went down more. But I found that really interesting. Like the worst market that the United States has seen, and there's been other depressions in other countries too, like Japan had a real estate recession as well. I guess my point is like over the long run, you got to make an investment bet like you're talking about. You got to make a bet on something and you got to be patient. And real estate is just one of those like just kind of engines where it's buoyed up by construction costs, by the fact that land, in a really good location is hard to develop land. I've tried to build houses. Like it's really difficult to get permits and to do that. So I'm just backing up your point that I think so many people sit on the sidelines waiting when like the real learning happens when you get the property, like just one property, like just do one, right?
Yeah, just one. Just once you get through the first one, fun. I mean, you're like, oh, this wasn't so bad. And the great thing about especially long-term rentals is you just repeat the process over and over again. Your knowledge level grows through small mistakes that you'll make. If you can get the first one done correctly, the best you can, it's going to be so much easier the next time because you have already built your team. You already got your agent. You've already got your property manager if you need one. You're learning how houses work and how much it costs to fix things up. And it does get easier. The first one is absolutely the hardest.
Well, let's go back to your story. So you moved to Memphis 2016, is that right? When you kind of decided
when we moved here.
Okay, moved to 2013. I want to kind of get into some details of your first deal and then talk about also how you buy and what you look for in Memphis there. What were the steps that you led up to that you had to do to get that first deal under your belt?
Well, you know how I told you we made all those offers in California. We move here and I say, Blake, we're not chickening out. We're going to do it this time. And he says, Casey, we just moved to a fixer-upper house. I'm the only one working. We have a baby and a 2-year-old, like a newborn. We moved here and my son was 3 weeks old. We just put a down payment on our first house. Like, where are we going to get this money from for these said rentals that you say you want now? And I'm like, oh, I was like, felt defeated just for a moment. And I was like, you know what? No one's going to tell me no. Only I get to tell myself no. So I said, I'm going to figure out a way to make some money. So I know a lot of people, that's a big hurdle. How am I going to come up with a down payment, blah, blah. Well, you figure it out. That's what you do. You don't go looking for handouts and right away trying to find private money. Like that kind of bothers me a little bit. Like, come on, do something on your own, let's get some skin in the game. So I started an Etsy shop. It took me a year and a half. I personalized bridesmaid shirts. I personalized little bunny rabbits for kids' Easter baskets, whatever I could think of. I would take a blank item and I would personalize it with my die cutting machine, like a Cricut silhouette sort of deal. And it took me a year and a half, but I saved up about $20,000 and I would be working upstairs. This was my craft room that I'm in right now. Now it's my real estate room. But in between my kids' naps on the weekends and my husband got home from work, like he'd watch the kids and I would do my craft stuff and I would sell it on Etsy and Facebook groups. So I did that for a year and a half and I saved up my money and that's what we used for our first down payment.
Side hustle up in your attic room and your craft room.
Yep.
So you just worked hard. It didn't happen overnight. You saved up the money. How did you start looking at properties? Like, did you evaluate certain neighborhoods? Did you say, hey, I want to buy it in this price range? Like, just take me through your thought process on that very first time.
So Memphis is pretty sketch. Okay. So it's one of the most dangerous cities in the country. It ranks like top 1 and 2. It switches out with Baltimore. Like every year, it's on the top murder list of the country. So you have to be really careful where you buy. Not everywhere is a good place to buy. And when I would go on a realtor.com, I would say, oh, we sort prices from lowest to highest. And you see houses for $5,000 and $10,000. And at first I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be rich. It's like Monopoly. I'm going to buy up every house on the street, on the block. Like I'm on all. And then you drive there and you go, how fast can we get out of town? Like, we can't stop at the stop sign because someone's going to jump in my car and kill me. It's dangerous in some of these areas. So that's when I realized it's quality. And sometimes quality costs more. And I'm okay with that. What we did was we looked in B-class neighborhoods, starter family homes where you get a lot of college graduates. You'd have more owner occupied than renters. People decorate for Halloween and Christmas and no one's afraid to trick or treat. And everyone keeps up their neighborhood really nice. For my first property, I wanted it to be in an area that I would live in. It wouldn't be my first choice, but I could live there if I had to, and it wouldn't be a big deal. So I wanted to make sure that I could be in a neighborhood that I knew would rent with quality tenants and I knew would appreciate over time. I was worried about buying in some of those cheaper neighborhoods where I know the rents kind of stay the same for 5 years and they're so cheap. They're always going to stay cheap because they keep getting ruined all the time. Like they're just bad neighborhoods. I didn't want to invest in crimey areas. We started driving around and doing research and checking for those starter family neighborhoods. And we bought our first one. It was a 3-bedroom, 1 bath. It needed very minimal rehab. I think we scraped the ceilings, which we shouldn't have done, but we did that. Coming from California, everyone has, scraped ceilings. And don't do that. That's a waste of time. I got some good workouts in my triceps. And we did paint the place and did some minor things, but otherwise we picked something that was pretty safe. And it was like $92,500, I believe was the cost. And at the time, I didn't know any better again, but I did a 20-year loan. And so my payment was a little higher, but we were still cash flowing. So that was fine. I think our cash flow at the time, our gross cash flow, I self-manage, was about $450 a month. Today, we still have that house and we bought that one in 2016. Today it's over $900 a month. And the only thing we've done since then was put in a granite countertop, took out the Formica and we painted the cabinets and put on some nicer hardware, but that's really it. So investing in like a quality neighborhood where tenants take care of your properties and you don't have to do a lot of heavy turnover, I think is key.
So I'm curious, just in terms of the top line numbers, like what you're renting it for back in 2016 compared to today, and then also the value of the property in 2016 today. Just kind of curious on those big numbers.
So value then, we bought it for $92,500. Today it's probably $250. We wouldn't cash flow today if it was move-in ready. The rent at the time, I believe, was $1050 or $1075. I think it was $1050, and then she had a cat, so I was an extra $25. Today we have someone in there and he pays $1525, but he's moving out actually at the end of the month. So I'm going to be raising rent. I'm trying to rent it out for probably $1650 or $1675.
Yeah, the point I wanted to emphasize is like you try to buy properties that cash flow today, but you mentioned something that you looked at two different things. You looked at the numbers, and yes, you wanted to pay the bills. You want to have some kind of at least break even, positive cash flow, depending on the market you're in. But you also evaluated the long-term potential of this property, and your mortgage was fixed that entire time, I assume, right? So your mortgage payment stayed the same, but as that rent went up and went up and went up, went up, now you're kind of that margin of cash flows increasing. And that's the understated, undersold side of real estate. If you can just own it and wait, like we said, you just buy the property and wait, and you're in the right location, it gets better and better and better.
Yes. So many people want to get rich quick today. They want everything today, right now, right now. And unfortunately, a lot of people get hung up on today's cash flow. They look at cash flow year one. Oh, it's not great. The cash flow is not great. I better find a better opportunity where I cash flow more. Well, I use my seesaw as an example, and I always use this with my pencil. And I say, you have cash flow on one end and appreciation on the other end. Do you want more? I forget what side I did. Do you want more cash flow? Well, your appreciation is going to be down. This is year one. Do you want more appreciation? Then your cash flow is going to be down. You want to kind of have the balance. You need both things, I think, for a healthy portfolio. You need cash flow and appreciation, but you're not going to get tons of cash flow up front in those better areas that are going to appreciate. In the C class, even especially D class neighborhoods, you're going to have stable rents. They're going to stay the same for 4 or 5 years. It's going to be hard to do a rent increase because you won't be competitive with the market, with the competition. You go, okay, well, I'm going to get this $500 a month cash flow today in my CD neighborhood, but my cash flow is going to be decreasing every year, which people don't think about because they're going to have possible property tax increases or home insurance going to go up every year, just inflation. The yard guy is going to charge you more. The AC guy is going to charge more. The guy who paints your house is going to charge more. So sure, you got a high cash flow today with your cheap property, but as time goes by, you're not really able to increase your rent steadily enough to offset all those other increases, all those other expenses. So buying today in a neighborhood that does cash flow some, but you can almost guarantee a 3% increase every year. Heck yeah. I get $30-40 every year to my rent if I wanted. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and one of the things that's not mentioned as much about one of the reasons you have C and D neighborhoods is they have a lot of supply of older properties, and it's just that neighborhoods go through cycles. I've owned some properties that were the lowest rent in my area, and not only was it hard to increase the rent, like you're saying, was you had these major capital expenses that came up pretty often. Like I would buy the property thinking, oh, it's rent ready, but then what about that 70-year-old plumbing? What about the fact that this, the electrics is really old in this property? What about the fact that that foundation has issues? What about the fact that the sewer line eventually collapses? Like there's just major expenses. And even if you are making $500 a month in cash flow, $6,000 per year, one major capex like that every year or two, cash flow is gone. I'm not saying you can't do that. Like I know people who invest in, that price range property, but you almost have to like completely gut the property, make it almost like new in order to be able to predict your capital expenses, to be able to make that work. And I don't think most of us run our numbers well on those. It's just really tricky to do. So I agree with you. I think the most foolproof way to just steady part-time real estate investor is to choose the neighborhood first. This is the mistake I made when I bought all the cash flow properties thinking that was great. And I eventually grew up and said, all right, wait a minute. I think these are going to be more stable. So agreeing with you, this is a really important point.
Yeah. And people hate to hear that because that takes time and they don't want the time. They want to do it today.
Yeah, it takes more patience. And so speaking of that, you bought your first property, you put 25% down. There wasn't any of the creative, burst strategy, seller financing, private money. I love how you just said, you got to save your money. You got to do your deal. Let's talk about like going forward though. So if you've been in the game, you bought a property or two, you get your foot in the door, then you hit this wall where you're like, well, now I got to save up the money for the next one. Prices have gone up and now figure the next one. Can you talk about your experience with that? And did you have to shift? Did you have to change things? Or how did you change to be able to get those next properties?
Bottom line is we still use all of our own money. So we don't partner. We don't do cash out refinances or anything like that. We still use our own money. We save it up and we buy about 1 or 2 a year. Like 1 year we didn't buy any. 1 year we bought 2. Last year we bought 2. We made an offer this morning on 1. My husband is very low risk and he would love to just pay them all off and have all the money come to him. And I'm like, well, let's not do that just yet. But what we do is we say, we are not going to increase our lifestyle, even with the more money that we make. So we don't go on $10,000 Disney World vacations. We don't buy brand new cars, with $1,500 a month payments. We live a very simple life, and we still have the same house that we bought 10 years ago. We still live in it. We're like the cobbler or whatever, the cobbler fixes everyone's shoes, but your own shoes are terrible. So we are slowly fixing up our house, but we put all our money into our rental properties. And for 8 years, and I say this all the time because it's like, this one really hits home. When we bought our house, the one we're living in, the kitchen should have been a gutter to begin with. It had original 1950s cabinets that had been painted 300 times. It had blue Formica countertops with wallpaper as the backsplash. I mean, it was hideous. And as soon as we bought the house, I'm like, the first thing we got to do is we're going to redo this kitchen. How much does it cost for a kitchen? Kitchen quote came in $30,000. This was at the time. Now the kitchen quotes are $60,000. So $30,000 to fix my kitchen. I go, okay, I could either spend the $30,000 that I have on my kitchen, or I can put it down on a house. And I say, which one makes me money? Well, my kitchen doesn't make me money. So forget the kitchen. I'm going to go buy a rental house. And we said that every single year for 8 years. Are we going to fix our kitchen or buy a house? Fix our kitchen and buy a house. So we were just saving money. All the cash flow from our rentals went into one bank account. Any bonuses or extra money that my husband made went into our bank account. And when we had enough for a down payment, we would just buy another one. And we would fix the houses up ourselves. So we would save on not having to hire labor for things. We would do everything. And by we, I mean mostly my husband. I did help and had to go. I love the outdoor stuff. So I get the chainsaw and stuff like that, which is kind of crazy. I do have a scar on my leg.
I could picture that.
An incident, yeah. So that's what we do is we just say, hey, we're going to do this ourselves. We're going to save it up. And I have a money tree on my website, like a little triangle tree my husband made. It's so awesome because it shows after, if every house provides you, let's say $500 a month cash flow, right? Now you have house 2, house 3, house 4. All those houses are plugging into cash flow into the pot. It's so much easier to save up for your down payment when you're getting thousands of dollars a month in rents from tenants. And you're not cashing out refinancing. So your cash flow is fairly large. People get stuck on, how do I get to number 2 and 3? Well, just give it a little bit of time. Your rents will go up. You'll be able to save just from your rental properties. Just a couple of years ago, we said, hey, Blake, you deserve a new truck. You've been fixing up these properties out of a 2007 Nissan Altima. I mean, imagine putting plywood and stuff in a Nissan Altima. We took money from the rental house account and bought him a truck. Like cash. So cool things can happen. And the more properties you have, the faster your savings account grows.
I heard a friend call that one time, like the rental snowball, like the rental cash flow snowball. Is essentially, you start small, like that little tiny snowball at the top of the hill, and then you roll it a little bit and it gets a little bigger. It doesn't seem like it's getting that big early on, but 7, 8, 9 years, 10 years later, all of a sudden that snowball is like really big and it has a lot of momentum. And you can take some snow from that snowball and buy a truck for cash, and it doesn't even stop the snowball. Like the snowball just keeps going. But they get rid of the snowball in the early days. Like you said, they buy the kitchen with that precious $30,000 in your first year or two, and that stops the snowball from going. If you look at that compounding many years later, wow, like what a difference. So I love it. So you just left all your money in the business. You had that rental property account. You lived off of what you had from your job. You lived frugally. You didn't change your lifestyle. And then that compounding, that rental cash flow tree kept growing. And so now you have 8 properties total. Is that right? 8 units?
Like plus our primary, but 8 rentals.
Plus the primary. Got it. I want to talk more about your buy box. So when you first bought that first property, you looked at B-class properties. Can you tell me more about like your ideal rental property? Like what does that look like, even in terms of the type of property? Are you buying multifamily, just single family? Do you have a certain criteria that you look for, just so people can kind of get an idea of what you are actually buying?
So I'm not opposed to multifamily for what some people may say, but that's only, we don't buy it because there's none out here. There is no multifamily in Memphis, and in the South, there's hardly any multifamily. And if it is, it's either expensive, downtown, amazing loft sort of deals, or they're in the ghetto. So I just don't do multifamily because there really isn't any. I prefer brick homes. I prefer single story. 2 stories, they leak, right? You're going to have drips from toilets and stuff. Like I want simple. Simple is easy. I like smaller square footage. The larger the square footage, that costs more to paint. Vaulted ceilings, no, thank you. They're going to charge me more to paint. I prefer a 3-bedroom, 2-bath would be great. There's just not a lot of those out here until you get in the $250 price range and up. So, okay, I'm cool with 3 1s. I would do a 3-2. I would do a 4-bedroom, but I'm not looking for 4 bedrooms because 4 bedrooms means more people. And I'm not really getting that much more in rent. Now, if I can convert a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom, but buy it at a 3-bedroom price, I would be down with that. or buy a 2-bedroom, convert to a 3-bedroom, but buying it at a 2-bedroom price. But now I've got this built-in equity and I can rent it for more too. I'm okay with that. So I like probably anywhere from 1,000 square feet to 1,500 square feet, brick, single story homes with no fireplaces. And I prefer the rents to be in the $1,500 range and up. So the class of the neighborhood is important to me. I do have properties in C-class neighborhoods. After my first house, we went and bought some cheaper ones in the C-class neighborhoods. And especially as prices rose throughout time with inflation, like, well, maybe we can buy something a little cheaper. We did. We have some houses in C-class, and I'm just not going to do that anymore. Like, that's it. I'm not. I've had all my problems have been with those types of tenants. And so no. So I'm back to only buying in B class. And with the property values today, right? They're insane. They're high and they're only going to get higher. So, hey, that's what I tell myself is prices are high, but they're only going to get higher. So am I going to be kicking myself for not going full force and buying more properties just because they're a little out of my price range? No. So what I do to combat that now and still stay in my zone that I like is I have to buy properties under 200,000 that need work. So my cash on cash return, I'll say, Chad, it's not great. Okay. We leave a lot of money in our deals because not only do I have to put 25% down on a fixer, I also need to put $30,000 into fixing it up. And I'm not able to then cash out refinance. I could, but then I wouldn't cash flow. So I have to leave my money in the deal. Like the property that we offered on this morning, we offered $185,000. It probably needs $30,000 to $45,000 worth of work, depending upon if we want to make it like a rent ready or kind of an A-class sort of property. And we'll have to leave our money in the deal. The property will rent out for $2,300, which is going to be great. And it's in the best neighborhood in Memphis. So got a 9 rated elementary school. So the property values there are skyrocketing. And to me, that's what's important because in a few years, that house on my ARV is 265, the house is going to be $400,000. And I'm going to be like, I have houses for rent in this neighborhood because nobody else can get them without sinking tons more money into it. So to me, I do play it in the long game and I want to buy properties that still fit my criteria of quality B class that are brick and they're appreciating.
That's what I'm seeing be successful today as well. Like it's so easy to try to remember what it was like 5-6 years from now and then not look at the market today and say, this is what is available for me on the market today. I can't compare my deal today to what I did 5-6 years from now because then you'll never buy a deal. I'm the same way. Like the deal I bought last year is right next door to another rental I had and the cash on cash return is not good. Like it's just a little bit, but it's knowing why you're buying the property. Like we just started the conversation off with this property 10 years from now, if I have a good bet that the rents are going to be a lot higher, if I can pay my loan down over that period of time, if I can fix my, interest rate for the next 10 years, to even an 8% interest rate, like this has been my attitude lately. It's like, there's a couple things that could happen. One, what if we keep having inflation and interest rates go to 10%? Then having a 30 or 8% loan will be actually a really good thing. And that's happened in the past. So that's very possible. Or interest rates could go down to like 6%. And then you can refinance and increase your cash flow at that point, and you'll be happy that you bought the property today at today's prices. So like either one of those scenarios, or even if it's just flat, like that's probably the worst case scenario, then like, so you're in good shape in all those scenarios. But most people wouldn't do the deal I bet Casey that you're talking about because, wow, I'm putting so much cash into this deal. Oh, I'm 50, 60, 70,000 bucks in a deal. My cash on cash return is not good. So they might pass on it and go look for other deals that maybe don't make them as much money over the long run.
I know. And so, that's the discrepancy. And that's why I'm not super popular out there because I don't do those popular things. Like, I don't do real estate for social media. I do it for me. I do it for our family. I do it for us. And I'm not going to be pressured to these tactics and strategies that just aren't right for me just to look good on social media. So I don't know, like it's weird to say that, on a social media platform, but
yeah, no, I think it's cool. Like I think the simplest thing is often overlooked, but it's often the best. Like back in my sports days, I remember this from football, like teams who were the best had these simple little plays and everybody kind of overlooked them, but then they won championships. Like I think that's what you're doing. You're like the modern version of John Schaub doing one house at a time, buying it. It's nothing crazy. It seems exciting, but then 5 years later, 6 years later, 7 years later, that money tree keeps growing. And I love this message because I hope people take that to heart. And if they can put off the 1-2 year satisfaction for the 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 year satisfaction, that's when real estate gets beautiful. Like that's when it really pays off. And you're starting to really see that now 6, 8 years after you started.
Yeah, we're really feeling it. I mean, we have a whole invisible person lives in our house and gives us their paycheck. So we definitely have a higher quality of life than our neighbor friends who are still working their jobs and spending their money on Disney vacations and brand new cars and putting their vacations on credit cards. Like, why do people do that? I don't get that. That's going on over there. But I'm like, well, we've got a third income, in our house now. And It's from rental properties and it's so low risk. We have so much equity in our homes. It's unreal. So maybe one day, we'll get a portfolio loan and we'll do something else. The opportunities are out there and we're ready for that if something comes along. I just want to keep it low risk, like just in case, hits the fan with whatever, we're fine.
So I've got a couple more questions. I love hearing the details of how you've grown and what you've done and the types of properties you buy. I think one of the other objections you probably get a lot, I get too, is this, well, real estate, you have to manage it yourself and this is like another job. So talk to me about the reality of this. I survey a lot of my own audience and people, and I ask them this question: how much time do you spend managing your 8 rental properties on a weekly basis, monthly basis, whatever you want to say there, just on average, just a guess? Would you say?
Like 0 on average. It's very low. What I try to do is keep my tenants in there forever, right? So I'll never raise, I really don't like to do rent increases, maybe every 4 years. And that's when property taxes go up. So I'll give them I'll tell them I need an increase, significant increase. You got in a deal for 4 years. Yeah, I need an increase. And so I'll do that. But my tenants don't move. I love that because it's no work. Like the work's done up front. You have to get the property ready for rent, fix it up, advertise showings. But then when someone's in there, you might get a phone call about something's broken and then I can send my husband or call someone to fix it. But that's not like every week somebody's calling with something broken. There are months go by, I hear from nobody. Months go by, I hear from no one. And I get the rent checks, in my inbox. It's very low time. Now, I'll say, after managing myself for 8 years or however long this has been now, I am sick of showing houses. So I am like getting sick of it. And I don't mind once the tenant's there, managing the relationship. We have the house on the market, like a house right now for rent. And it's like, all weekend I got phone calls and I didn't answer any. It's like, dang it, Casey, I am missing people renting my house because I don't want to answer the phone and talk to them. So I don't know.
I've been there too. Yes. Well, I took all my calls for years and years and years. I never did the work myself, so I don't have that advantage that you and your husband have, but I have always done the leasing and I did everything for many years. But then, the cool thing is as your cash flow goes bigger, if you want to pay properties off, like what my business partner and I did, we hired everything out. First, we had an internal property manager and then she retired. Good for her, but we were unfortunate for us. And then we hired 2 different property management companies. So like now, yes, I get a text here and there. We have 100 units. There's always, last couple weeks ago, we had a water main break. We had a roof that had to be replaced last week. So there's things that happen. But for me, it's like, are you willing to spend $8,000 on this? Are you willing to spend $3,000? Yes, spend my money, please. Like that's pretty much what I have to say here and there. Or get another bid. I want to go back to what you just said. Like it's a lot of work up front. When you buy a property, when you find it, when you stabilize it, when you get new tenants, but with the right properties and the right type of business model, this long-term rental business model, it gets to be a very passive business. Like I was in Spain living there, you have 3 kids, right? And you're doing a lot of activities and you have other things going on. Like your main job or other things, and the real estate management is like a side gig that's very flexible that also pays you another income. So I love to hear other people's perspective on that.
I do think though, if we start traveling more, whatever, or we get a few more properties, I might give up. There's some houses where I'm like, I don't really feel like if someone moves out of some of these houses, I'm going to pass it on to PM. Like I just don't want to.
There's a time and a place. There's a season, right? Yep. For everything. So we've talked about the details of your portfolio. Really appreciate you being transparent about that. I'm just curious going forward, it seems like you're kind of at a transition point where your properties have grown up. You got a good stable portfolio. Your husband's still working at his job, I assume too. What do you see like 5 years from now? What does your household and your future look like? Have you thought about kind of what's next with your real estate?
I have, and we've been talking about that a lot over the past few months. I anticipate probably at some point my husband not working anymore. He really likes his job, works with his best friend. So, he's like, I like it. And I'm like, okay, but you're stuck at home. Like, I think it would be fun for us to try flipping once he's not working anymore, just to give us something to do during the day. We don't like to sit around. We're not like couch potatoes. We don't like watching television. We get really bored. And on the weekends, it's like, let's replace all of our interior doors. Like, okay, that's like what we do with, when we have nothing going on. Maybe we can do some flipping. We might try that for fun. We had saved up a large chunk of cash over the past year because we wanted to buy a lake house and then use it for an Airbnb. I'm getting over that dream because there just aren't any and I'm tired. So we're going to be buying more rental houses this year. We have a lot of cash to do that. Hence the offer we made this morning. So I think once we're tapping out soon of our 10 government loans, right? So we've started splitting them off. We used to buy them together when I wasn't making any money. And then we've started splitting them off. Like Blake will buy one, I'll buy one, Blake will buy one. In some of our houses, we only owe like 30, 40,000 left. So I'm like, okay, well, if we really want another loan, government loan, we can just pay one off. And then we have another spot opened up instead of having to go DSCR stated income and then get the high interest rates, which they're already high, but even higher, oh my God, a 10% interest rate. If I can get, 7.625 with a government loan, I'm going to try that first for 30 years. Kind of like rearranging probably maybe our portfolio, maybe going with a portfolio loan to open up some more spots, or maybe using some lines of credit. But we definitely need with inflation and how much things are costing. And I'm worried we're going to be in renter nation soon, and housing affordability is going to be through the roof, and young couples will, like, that dream of owning a home is over. Like that was an American dream of the past. That's what I think. And so we really do need to scoop up houses, because I feel like it's only going to get worse. Housing prices are only going to get worse. They're only going to go higher. I mean, who knows with interest rates, but with inflation, I think we're getting a little bit lied to on what that is. I think it's way higher than what has been stated. It's more important now than ever to buy houses, because they're only going to get more expensive. We really got to put our foot down and buy more houses as fast as we can. That's what our plan is.
Got it. So you got options. You could be flipping. You might be doing some short-term rentals. You might be buying the same long-term rentals. But the cool thing is you have a pattern. You've got a process you've been putting in place. And to me, like, the coolest thing about all of this is then who knows what you're going to do 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Like, nobody really knows, but now you got options, right? That's where I feel like in my life as well. Like, I know what I want to do in the next year or two. Beyond that, who knows? Like, get these kids to school and get them to activities and figure it out next. But congratulations on what you've done, Casey. I'm really impressed and appreciate all you do. And I follow your social media channel. I'm going to put links to everything below so people can check you out and follow you. But I want to give you a chance to tell everybody, what you have going on, where they can follow you, and how they can connect with you.
Well, everyone can find me every day on Instagram, Brick by Brick Wealth. You can find me on Instagram, Brick by Brick Wealth, YouTube, Brick by Brick Wealth. I put videos out on Thursdays. And also my website, Brick by Brick Wealth. I help people with their first investment property. I do one-on-one coaching. So if anyone is interested in that, you can find more info on my website. And I got a lot of free, fun, good, really good guides. If anyone's looking to get started, I have Slay in there, like the guide to slay your first rental property, like all the things you need to know. If you're thinking about investing, but you're not sure if rentals is for you, this is something that you should check out. It's a free download. You can get it from my website. Thank you so much for having me on, Chad. I've been really looking forward to being on your podcast for a while. So I'm honored. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I will put links to all of that, and so people can check you out. And thank you so much. I look forward to seeing what you do next, and I'll be following along on your channel as well. So see you soon. In this episode, Casey shared how she keeps her rental properties a low time commitment and low maintenance by buying quality properties in quality neighborhoods. But what we didn't cover are the details of the repairs we need to do as landlords in order to keep our properties well maintained. So in the next video, I interview Matt, the lumberjack landlord, to go over the best construction materials you should use as a landlord to keep your property low maintenance and to keep your tenants happy. If you're watching on YouTube, you can click on the thumbnail above me here, or you can click on the link in the podcast or the YouTube description below. See you in the next video.